everyone and welcome. My name is Tracy Thompson. I'm here to unveil the historical plaque for our Strathbogie Memorial Hall. Now, my grandfather, John Riddle Smith, was the president of the Hall Committee when it was officially opened in 1955. And my other grandpa, W.D. Baxter, was also involved at this time. I'm just going to read an excerpt from the Centenary book up to 1977. And it says, what led to the establishment of the Memorial Hall during the war years of 1939 to 45, discussions and a meeting took place about building a suitable memorial for the members of the fighting forces. For that purpose, a public meeting was convened by Mr. J.R. Smith in October 1943. Mr. E.B. Tay was elected secretary, and Mr. C. Rowland moved that a memorial hall be erected to members of the fighting services. Then suggestions were called for by Mr. E.B. Tame. Mr. E.B. Tame suggested that a memorial hall be built, with support for this idea coming from Messrs. H.C. McCullough, J.H. Hobbs, W.D. Baxter, C. Rowland, A.B. Crosby, A. Jacker, and W.G. Mackerel, and a lot of those people and families are still here today. Now, much of this history, as Lisa said, can be found in the Centenary history books on sale here today, down the back there. Now, I think the young men and women of the district did sacrifice much of their youth for our country and freedom during World War II, and I'm very proud of my family for the contribution they and many other locals made so we could have the freedoms we have today. After the Memorial Hall opened, it was a social hub for the community, with many meetings, sports, dances, and of course balls being held. My older sisters, Bambi and Sue, were part of the first miniature debutante ball, which was about 1958. My mum would love to dress up and go out and would look forward to these occasions. A lot of us girls would do tap dancing lessons here, our mothers making and sewing sequins on our tutus, and would nail taps on our shoes in preparation for concerts each year up on the stage. In my primary school days, Strathbogie State School number 2181 held its annual Christmas concert on stage every year, plays, singing, and Christmas carols, and then a visit from Santa with lots of presents. And always supper in the supper room full of yummy cakes and slices afterwards. I was 11 years old in 1967 when the lights were turned on in the main street of Strathbogie. The SEC was turned on. This was a big event for our town, and a big ball was held that night in the Memorial Hall called the Switch On Hall. Lots of people here today would have been there. Thereafter, life changed for our generation. No more engine room out the back of our house and no more homemade ice cream. And I feel very, very privileged to be unveiling this plaque. As part of the historical event, this building has been a part of many of our families' lives over many generations.
Now, I'm not going to read that one.
Asking me to do this. Actually, Harold got the phone call and I was out. And I think it was you, wasn't it? Yeah, it was. And in any case, he said he got told what it was, and he said she will be there. So sorry, everybody, I'm here. And my mother had the post office. She was of Joyce Simpson. And she was a Crosby before she married my father. And of course the Crosbys are well known here. I'm not going to sort of say a lot because you'll hear lots from everybody else. But I think one of the things that I remember most was about how friendly everyone was in Strathbogie. Like I'd say to my mother, I'm going for a ride on my bike, and this would be just after breakfast. And she'd say, well, I want you home for dinner. Right, so I'd go to Auntie Ruby Simpson's and I'd do whatever there, and then I'd go to my grandfather and grandmother's and I'd do whatever there, and then I went And I don't know if anyone remembers the Jorgensons, and they were a long way further out, but I'd ride out there. I was always home for dinner. And sadly Mum died before I could ask her, but I'll bet you anything you like those people were ringing up saying, now Heather's been here, now she's going there, and then she's been here and she's going there. So everybody was looked after everyone in Strathbogie, which was absolutely marvellous. And I've already listened to some of the things, and I think, oh yes, I can remember that. So, well, thank you very much, and I was very honoured and to be able to unveil the post office. So thank you very much, everybody.
Lisa and Jill, Lisa Duggan and Jill Smith rang me September to say that they're unveiling the plaque for the TJ Nolan Sale Yards, and would I come down from New South Wales to say a few words. And I was quite honoured because I worked with my father from '78, but this was after the yards had closed here, but I didn't know my grandfather. Unfortunately, he died the year before I was born, but from all accounts, he was a great man. But so I had no hesitation in coming down, and there's a lot of people here I've seen, familiar faces, and a lot of familiar, from the speeches so far, there's been a lot of familiar names mentioned that when my time was down here, we were doing business with the famous families such as the Fergusons, the Hills, the Mackerels, Kings, Rowlands, Walkers. You could go on forever, and I know I've missed a lot of them. But they were here, and they were very well-established families, very good with their livestock. I came up with a friend today, and I was explaining about the ram in the, and I know I'm progressing away from the sale yards, but the Japanese built that monument to the quality of the merino wool, which is a great credit to the breeders up here, because in 40-inch rainfall, it's all on breeding, not on hunger fine like we have in New South Wales at Yass and Walcheren areas like that. So it's been an area, it was a famous spud growing area up through here. It's been a very, very productive part of the country, and it spans now, it's called the Strathbogie Council. So you've obviously got some power up here. I don't know how you've done it, but there used to be a rower and a Gambia or something, and suddenly Strathbogie just reached everybody. So maybe Dan Andrews could learn from that, but anyway. But if we had been at the sale yard, there would have actually been an option here. I was going to give you a little rendition of how they would have sold the stock back in those days, but we're in the hall, so no. But I will start.
Yeah, sign up so you can do a rendition.
Say hello, no. But it's quite ironic, my grandfather, who, as I said, he actually died as Shire President, so he would have been President of the Strathbogie Council of those days were lengthened, and it was interesting, somebody, Jill, I think, mentioned the koala bears. He was instrumental bringing the koalas bears, introducing them back into the Euroa Shire. So, and the other visionary he had, that he built a number of things, the golf course, which was interesting to hear about this one. He built the one in Euroa. He used to go out to our farm and say, how come the crops aren't in? And they used to say, Mr. Nolan, we can't put the crops in, all your machinery's at the golf course. But he did have a visionary. My father told me that he said he wanted to build from Euroa Park, Sevens Creek, all the way up here up to Sevens Creek to Strathbogie. You want to have a walkway for everybody. So he's a bit of a visionary going back in those eras. But these yards were, we're going to go back in, they were open in '49, but they even were selling livestock up here well before then. And they were the days when it was walk in, walk out. There was no livestock transports, trade trucks or single decks or bigger trucks nowadays. But so, it was a very, logistically, they did a magnificent job, and it was a great credit to them. And but it was interesting how these yards were built on the old church side, old TJ. Now, if you're a fan of the cloth, don't take this the wrong way, but he used to have a saying, if your neighbour reads scripture, brand your calves early. So I just would like to say thank you very much. It is a great honour. As I said, I didn't know my grandfather. I knew what influence he had in the stock industry. And as for my father, well, he was a legend, and I'm proud to say that I did work with him. And thank you for the day. Thank you.
G'day everyone. I'd like to thank Lisa and the Strathbogie Historical Group for all the work they've done. It's been managing the weather. And the hall looks fantastic. For those of you who don't know me, I'm David Joyce. I'm the grandson of Tom and Henrietta Joyce. Henrietta Joyce held the license, or was the licensee of the Strathbogie Hotel from 1943 until 1948. On their behalf and the Joyce family, I'd like to unveil the plaque.
If you wander down to the sale yards and then you're coming back, the pub is on the opposite side of the road near the creek. You can't see this here, but we have a projector show going on today, and we've got all the licensee details of who owned the pub and when. I forgot to mention before, David mentioned the church and the sale yards. The first ever church service in Bogie was held under a gum tree where the sale yards are, so hence the religious. And the pub didn't start as a pub. It started as R.H. Graham's store. So Graham's had a store in Euroa, but the road was so impassable back and forth that it was easier just to build a store up here. There was church services run in the hotel, in the store, and it was also a post office. So the first licensee was Mr. T.W. Curtin. There's rumour, according to the old books, that the Kelly gang used to drink there because there were horses tied up there late at night. And there's some information about the pub being sold. It actually went down three times: 1892, 1923, 1937, 4 times, finally burning down in 1956. So feel free to go and have a look. Later years, the hotel offered 14 bedrooms and seating and dining for up to 30 people. Yep.
I can remember the night the hotel burnt, the last time the hotel burnt down because we were rung at the post office and my mother had to get everybody out to go and do something about it.
And again, thanks to David.
I was in Melbourne when I got the call this, and you have to have gum boots. So I ended up with these, which are a couple of sizes too big. Well, the Methodist Church. Hobbs, Jacker, Pendy. Hobbs, Jacker, Humphrey, Smith, Moore, Mackerel, Hart, Tame, Benny, Schultz, Chapman, Moore, Skinner, Woolley, Taylor, Jackson, Roland, or Voland, Mildren, Smart, and Crew. You are possibly related to one or more of these families. And many of these families started off in the Geelong, Yan Yean area, and they made the move in the 1800s to this beautiful wild Strathbogie ranges. Well, they had a lot to do to establish this little town and to turn it into a strong community. They are the ones who organised to raise the money, procure the land for £1, then build the Methodist church that was on that site in 1884, down near where the garage was. It still is today. It was built by local contractor Mr. Jacker. The building cost about £95 and fundraising was by tea meetings catered by the ladies of the district. A bachelor's table was given special catering attention by the young women of the church community. Successive generations and newcomers to the district ran the church until 1984 when it was sold and moved. That's over 100 years. My grandfather, Philip Smart, was one of many who worked hard in the running of the church, and he was the C trustee for over 30 years until his death in 1876. He married Lillian Croom, more about the Crooms later, in that church in 1929. Then in the 1980s, my uncle Neville Smart married Sue Long there as well. Sadly, only a month after his father Philip's wedding, his father, named Philip Smart Sr., died. During his life, he was also a church trustee. My family experience represents all the families of this church and the baptisms, weddings and funerals that were held in this pretty spot. These people had a strong Christian belief and their church was extremely important in their lives. They were living in the bush, then they cleared the land, and it was a long day's drive to get to the nearest town, Euroa. They were dependent on their community when they needed help. They needed God on their side. The timber church that was there started off as the Strathbogie West Church up the Tennis Court Road on the corner of Euroa and Creek Junction roads and Town roads. Mr. Humphreys kindly offered a chunk of this land to build it on for £1. In 1895, the church was moved to that spot in Strathbogie by horses or bullocks, I presume. We still have all the original records of this church, Irene, custodian of them, with the beautiful pen and ink writing of the secretary dating back to the late 1880s. So many of your forebears' names are in those books. The first couple to marry were Mr. and Mrs. Jeffers, who were given a Bible donated by the Hobbs family. I'm sure many of you will have stories about this church and the people who attended it. My family story concerns the Presbyterian church here and how my Methodist family impacted on that. In 1919, my 15-year-old grandmother, Lillian Croom, and her sister Lucy, who was later Lucy Palmer, came home from the dance and they were washing their feet in a basin of water. They lived right beside the Presbyterian church, or now the Uniting, just a few doors from here, and their parents ran the bakery, which was also still here at the back of the house. The kerosene lantern was lit and on the table beside them so they could see what they were doing. Their mother, Ada Croom, had a habit of overfilling the kerosene, and suddenly flames started to run down, setting fire to the tablecloth. Quick-thinking teenage Lillian picked up the basin of water that she was washing her feet in and threw it over the flames. Unfortunately for her, flames spread and their lovely house completely burnt down, taking with it the timber Presbyterian church next door. It was a tragedy in their hard-working community, and Lillian told me years later, I got the blame for that. But nobody focused on whose fault it was. The community rallied around, helping the genial baker, who's described as, and his now homeless family, and the poor Presbyterian folk. The three churches of the town, Protestant, Methodist and Presbyterian, all worked together to help each other and to recover from this and many other challenges in the community. The minutes of the Presbyterian Church recorded in 1929, this being the first trustee meeting held, or 1919, sorry, this being the first trustee meeting held since the Presbyterian Church was destroyed by fire, it was moved by Mr. A. Taylor that a letter of sympathy be sent to the committee of the Presbyterian Church regarding the loss and offering the Methodist Church at the nominal rental of £1 per year for use of Sunday school and church service. Seconded by Mr. A. Kubel. Carried. So the Methodists redeemed the actions of their flock and focused on the practicalities of supporting their fellow townsfolk. I'd like to thank Lisa and everybody on the team for organising this fantastic day, and it's so excellent to have the foresight to record the early history of Strathbogie on those plaques, so that people who are not really into reading about family history could wander down the street and see it. I'd like to thank you. Thanks, bye.
And the congregation of St Andrews for the privilege of being asked to unveil this plaque. You may ask how a South Gippslander has made it all the way up here today. Not only in taking on the challenge of weather conditions, we're a bit worried about the water, but how is the connection made? My great-grandfather, Reverend James Raff, or Jazz as he was known to many, had deep affection for this area, with it being his first Presbyterian home mission appointment in April 1902. Great-grandfather was born in Forres, Scotland, and left at the age of 19 in 1875 for Australia. We know little of his life in his homeland, but understand that he lived with his mother and stepfather, who was unkind to him, giving him reason to leave. He and his wife Charlotte, who was a very austere lady, born a Quaker, named after her great aunt Charlotte Elizabeth Fry Jones, the English prison reformer, were married in the Baptist Church in Jamestown, South Australia in 1880. He ran a partnership business, Jenkins and Rath Coach and house painting there. In years to come, his painting and signwriting skills were not lost, as it was said that at all his postings he would be known to paint the church and tidy things up. James and Charlotte had 10 children. Sadly, as was the case with early life in Australia, they lost their first 3 children, twin boys and a daughter in infancy due to illness. They moved away from Jamestown after their 4th child was born in 1886 to Paran in Victoria, where James undertook a journalism position. Great-grandfather was appointed an elder, being a member of the session from 1888 to 1892 in the Presbyterian Paran congregation. And so outstanding was his service to the Lord that he was encouraged by many ministers to devote his life to the ministry. He was accepted as a Presbyterian Home Mission agent in April 1902. So begins his connection with the Strathbogie district, as his first station was Gorham, with a 3-year posting, and here also was where our grandmother Grace, the youngest of the Rath children, was born. As with most ministry postings, moving parishes was common, so James and family between 1906 to 1919 were at Chilton, Wonthaggi, Rushworth and Beulah Hopetoun. In December 1919, great-grandfather was inducted at Whittlesea when Grace was 15 years old. He would travel by horse and jinker to outlying churches, as he had done in this area. Sundays were a busy day, with Grace having to care for the horse after trips of 15 to 20 miles, while her father rushed in for a quick tea before the evening service. During this time at Whittlesea was when great-grandfather was invited to return to Strathbogie to open the St Andrew's Presbyterian Church on the 5th of February 1922. So most of you probably worked out that there's 100 years this year in February that he opened the church. The wooden church, built in 1885, where worship was held, and he would have preached from in his early ministry years, as you may know from Shallingow, was burnt down in 1919 after the house next door of the baker, Mr. Croon, caught fire and spread. The rebuilding of the church, not long after World War I finished, would have required a great community effort in raising funds and then tending to construction. Needless to say, they used concrete blocks for the next rebuild. And it's still standing, so it's a credit to the community. The attendance of great-grandfather would have taken some planning, as he would have travelled by horse, probably in his jinker. The distance from Whittlesea was over 80 miles, so 130 kilometres in today's numbers. In estimating the travel, I looked up the Common coach details. Their horses could cover around 30 to 40 miles a day, so the trip would have taken him at least 3 days, let alone the challenging terrain faced. This journey today takes 90 minutes by vehicle. Great-grandfather continued his ministry after Whittlesea, was back to Rushworth, then on to Cowes, Phillip Island. It was here that Grace met her husband John Cleland, married by her father in 1931. She became the organist of the church and piano accompanist for the township for over 50 years and was the first woman elder there. On his semi-retirement back to Melbourne in April 34, Grace asked her father before he left Cowes if he would come to visit her in hospital and baptise a newly born daughter, his granddaughter, Charlotte, which he did on the 12th of April 34. This was my mother. The following month, James accepted a 3-week position at Nathalia, whilst meeting with a congregation member to plan a communion service for the Sunday worship. He dropped dead to a heart attack in May 1934 at the age of 77. His wife Charlotte, who had been a midwife, passed away in 1941 at the age of 83. I am sure James and Charlotte along with those that have passed before us here in Strathbogie, are all with us today. Once again, I thank you for asking me to attend and share in this special day of recognition of the history of Strathbogie. And may we all continue to acknowledge the footsteps of history of those who have been before us. As you may all appreciate, visiting a church, and given it is Sunday, could not be complete without a song. So I ask you to join us in this closing blessing. So I'd ask Guy and Joan, thank you for helping out with the words. And also, just before I finish, the church is open today and has lots and lots of historical materials. So if you get a chance, pop down and have a look at what's in there. But I'd like to grab your little sheets. And Guy, if you could.
You might have gathered that I missed the building in between. That was supposed to be Helen Hill. So Helen Hill, welcome up for the Orange
Thank you, Maggie. Firstly, I would like to thank the committee for giving me the opportunity of speaking and unveiling this plaque. When I was first approached, I was led to believe it was to do with the Rechabites, as my father was very involved in that.
We can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Can you hear it now?
A little bit better.
Okay. When I was first approached about speaking today, I was led to believe it was to do with the Rechabite church, the Rechabites. As my father was very involved in that, but checking, the Orange Lodge has nothing to do with the Rechabites. The Loyal Orange Lodge built the hall in 1889. This hall was for the Protestants, and hence it was known as the Protestant Hall. The Rechabites first met in 1892. I do know this lodge was called Mountain of Hope. My dad was not a member of this branch as he belonged to Euroa, but in later years when they were having trouble getting a secretary-treasurer, he took on office bearer of both the branches, and by that time they were mainly meeting in private houses. A list of names from the early days were Beatty, Briley, Mackerel, Smith, Hubel, Johnson, Wakenshaw, Richards, Hewish, Cook, Crosby, Walker, Price, Hobbs, Rowland, Shields and Taylor. And the first two lady members were Miss B. Mackerel and Miss M. Johnson. I have a paper cutting from a ball that was held in 1896, where couples came far and wide and they made a profit of £7 to £8. For you young ones, that's $14 to $16, a big amount. Dancing commenced at 7 p.m. and finished at 7 a.m. Refreshments were served at 12 midnight and again at 4 a.m. for the price of 9 pence a head, and Mrs. Tadford from Boho provided the meal, and it was paid for by the committee. During that night there was also singing and recitations. Most of the ladies wore black frocks with various trimmings such as lace, velvet, jet and chiffon. The hall was bought by the public in the 1920s. Over the years, the hall has held many functions such as dances, balls, social events, cards, meetings, and the Church of England held services there. There were flower shows where people would bring their veggies, flowers, crafts, etc. to be judged and prizes awarded. My early memories of coming to the hall was to dances as my dad played the violin in the band. I remember the kitchen out the back room and the fireplace with the big 4-gallon cans hanging over the fire with milk which was brought in by all the farmers for coffee, which was made by Mrs. Price, and that was to die for. When the dance is finished at midnight on a Saturday, no dancing on a Sunday, supper would be served in the main hall, and the men would carry big cane baskets of cups around, and followed by big pots of tea and coffee, then sugar, etc. And the ladies would carry plates of supper around, of which all the ladies had brought a plate. The balls were sit-down suppers in the supper room, and there was either 2 or 6 sittings, depending how many people were there. The band would play. They were made on a Friday night, and the band would play till 2:30, provided all the supper had been finished. Otherwise, the band would keep playing. A lot of the dances and balls were run by the CWA, tennis, cricket and football clubs on a fairly regular basis. Those clubs would provide the suppers and the ladies cutting sandwiches by cutting the bread and spreading with no soft butter those days. And it was to go to the ball dances, it was 4 shillings for ladies and 6 shillings for men. And the balls were 8 shillings for ladies and 12 shillings for men. Those days, people would play their sport on a Saturday, race home, milk their cows, have tea, and be back all dressed up by 8:30 when the music started. I remember when the new hall was built and this one was sold and became a garage. This operated till 2005. At that time, it was sad to see the garage close, as not only a business closing, but a meeting place for the men. Then it became a restaurant, and now it's a private home. If these walls could only talk, I guess they would have lots of stories and a lot of romances which started here. Thank you, and I invite unveiling the plaque.
I'm not quite sure how many people are doing this one. I think there's a family reunion going on. But no one told him he was doing this, so it doesn't matter.
Good morning, everybody. This is quite a bit of a strange happening. Nobody said that I was to stand up here and say something. But anyway, what can I say? Go back.
Whatever you want.
Go back a lot of years when we used to live here in the blacksmith shop and the lolly shop at the front of it. Used to do all the wonderful things back then. It was a different world to what it is now. I'm not too sure whether it was better or worse. I think it's better. No, it's wonderful to be able to be here. And well, I won't talk for too long. I'll get out of the road and I can...
Wasn't your dad the blacksmith?
Sorry?
Isn't your dad Albert?
Yes, my dad was Albert, yes. He was, and my mum was Frances.
And what did your mum used to do when the Easter sports tournament was on? Didn't she used to cater food?
I believe so, yes. I'm very sorry, but I'm sort of losing a bit of it up here. But now I know used to be a lot of people come through the shop to get meals and things like that. But yeah, it was just a wonderful world back then. Because I say thank you for bringing us here. I'll have a look around again and bring back some memories in the old shop when we
We just put that on her. So you'll see that Albert heard his father purchased the operation in 1920 and continued to operate until 1980. And at one stage, Albert employed 5 men and he shod 26 horses per week on average. And as I said, that is National Trust and Heritage listed. It's well worth a look. And I've heard a lot about your mum. As Alan Moore, who's no longer with us, said as a kid he used to collect bottle tops and take them to your mum and trade them for lollies. So, hence the question about your mum. Thank you again. I want to thank Herbert Price.
Thanks, Lisa. Well, it's magnificent to see the hall with so many people. It's absolutely outstanding to see it's all this full. The Strathbogie Butter Factory was opened before my time and even before my father Harry's time. So unfortunately, I can't give you any family stories or memories. Strathbogie has always been a town renowned for its outstanding produce. Not only was the district known for the superfine wool it produced, but also for the quality of the milk and the cream. The butter factory was opened in the spring of 1891 with butter at the price of 7.5 pence per pound. An abundance of butter saw the excess being sent to Melbourne and even England. The following year, in 1902, another butter factory was also opened in Strathbogie North. In 1905, the butter factory was making approximately 50 tonnes of butter from the cream supplied by at least 27 local farming families. A large acreage at the time was a 320-acre soldier settlement block, which would be able to support a big family back then, unlike today. The factory boasted an 8 horsepower engine, 12 horsepower boiler and a 600-pound butter churn. When the original factory burnt down, it was quickly rebuilt and reopened in September of 1907. The 2-storey building was used until 1936, when it unfortunately burnt down again. The cream from the district was then collected and sent to Euroa Butter Factory. Dad would tell us about a young Max Burnside collecting the cream cans from his father and the other farmers in the Strathbogie to take to Euroa. I'd like to thank the committee for asking me to represent the Broughton family in unveiling this plaque today. I know if Dad was still with us, he would love to share a story or two. That may take a full day with everyone, probably about all the sites featured here today. Thank you. I'd also like to thank the committee for doing such a wonderful job and getting it all very, very well organised. And I think they deserve a round of applause.
And I forgot to mention we got stubby holders for sale, so make sure you get one of them and fill it. So I'd like to invite Faye Guthrie up with her son John. They're going to unveil the plaque for what is now the general store and commence life as a cooperative. Let me just fix this. Welcome, Faye.
can't stand up very well for very long. Thank you for this opportunity to come over the fire for the Strathbogie. Is that right? Could I stand up? Right. That's right. Anyway, thank you. To own this part of Strathbogie shop, I can remember the shop as a little girl, and I felt very special when I very special when I got to Kerosene Lamps. And I remember Mr. Levy having the shop there when I was little. And I felt very honoured too when I could go to the shop and buy something all by myself. And it's a shop sold just about everything for the district, including, and I was amazed when somebody would, about young teenagers, somebody went and bought their rubber boots there. This is when Mr. Levy and also, anyway, the shop is something useful, and thank you very much for allowing me to come over. Just to have a talk, that's all.
So that was Faye Simpson, and you'll see that's the advertisement from when Simpsons purchased the cooperative and it became a general store. This is actually, you can see on the sign, a receipt from Levy's time. I think it's made out of one of the dashes, but you can read it on the sign. Well, that brings us to the end of all our signs. Hopefully the primary school kids have ripped the covers off by now. It's a nice day, lots of sunshine. It's not going to rain at all. As I said, plenty of food, support the kids out the back here, wander around, catch up. We'll be setting up a projector show that will run all day. So enjoy yourselves, everyone. Thank you.
Lisa had this idea to put to do the plaques in about pre-COVID, and then she's put all this together, and we just want to say thank you very much for the